We have just returned from a very successful visit to Brazil, which continued to strengthen our very good fraternal and political relations with Brazil. But the visit has underscored the need to strengthen more trade and defense cooperation between the two countries. These are two democracies that can achieve a lot if we work together on a number of trade issues. Brazil has got a lot of advanced technology, research, as the President mentioned, in Brasilia, that South Africa can gain from. And also South Africa has got a lot of abilities that Brazil can gain from. We just need to strengthen and work more together to build up on our trade. We have also returned from the funeral of the late civil rights activist, Reverend Jesse Jackson, which were warmly and gladly welcomed by the American population, including and in particular Black Americans, who have shared with us their history of anti-apartheid activism and their continued willingness to work with the democratic South Africa to use their skills to develop our country and build beyond the 30 years of our democracy. We will, from tomorrow, the 12th to the 13th of March 2026, host SADC Council of Ministers here in the DERCO building. This session of Council of Meeting of Ministers is in our capacity as interim chair of the Council of Ministers of SADC, which is aimed to implement the theme of the 45th SADC Summit as adopted in August 2025 in Madagascar, in which the theme was and still is advancing industrialization, agricultural transformation, and energy transition for a resilient SADC. As it may be recalled, South Africa in November 2025 was elected as the interim chair of SADC until August 2026. This was due to the unconstitutional changes of power in Madagascar. This meeting will also take stock of a number of SADC initiatives. It is preceded by a standing committee of senior officials and a special meeting of senior officials and experts on the Regional Indicative Strategic Development Plan, the RISDP 2020-2030 of SADC, which is a 10-year framework designed to deepen Southern African Development Community, regional integration and development, which has been held from the 4th to the 10th of March 2026 to prepare the draft agenda and report to the Council of Ministers. This will feed into all the other sectoral meetings that my colleagues and counterparts will hold here in South Africa and in Zimbabwe. Because of the unique nature of the interim chairing now of SADC, which we had to take over, we have agreed to share this responsibility with Zimbabwe. So some meetings will be held in South Africa, some will be held in Zimbabwe. And we can be able to share with you which ones will be held in South Africa, which ones will be held in Zimbabwe. If you're asking yourself which meetings, there will be sectoral meetings like meetings of ministers of finance, meetings of ministers of trade, meetings of ministers of minerals, those meetings. So they will be shared between ourselves and Zimbabwe for us to be able to absorb and carry this institution. It is important that SADC continues to function as an institution that must preserve the protocols of SADC and build on regional integration. South Africa's leadership is distinctively reflected in our stewardship of Agenda 2063, ensuring the continent's development blueprint remains on track. In this regard, I have also been elected to chair the monitoring plan and mechanism of Agenda 2063 of the African Union. This commitment must help us achieve the Agenda 2063 of the African Union, and we continue to contribute to the implementation of the flagship program of the African Union, the AfCFTA. We have also demonstrated our commitment to the African Union when we chaired the Committee of Five Summit on South Sudan on the margins of the African Union Summit in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. We are looking forward to support the work of South Sudan to exit from the revitalized peace agreement. And the only way to exit this agreement is by South Sudan holding its first democratic elections, which are expected to be held at the end of this year in December 2026. We understand the fragility of the agreement and the challenges that they are having in the compliance with the agreement. But South Africa remains prepared with its counterpart in the Committee of Five to hold all the parties together to account and to hold them by hand towards their first democratic elections. With regards to the Middle East, the escalation of tension in the Middle East heralds great anxiety and uncertainty in the region and the world. These global challenges demand greater solidarity and unity, especially amongst countries in the South. As such, this matter continues to be looked into and seized. We will continue to be seized with this matter as South Africa. I have had calls with my counterparts in the GCC states to express solidarity with them on the account of what is happening in the region. The South African government is monitoring the situation and with concern that the conflict has resulted in the destruction of civilian infrastructure across the region. This has also resulted in inflationary pressures, energy insecurity, and food insecurity as a result of the fertilizer shocks in the agricultural sector. South Africa reiterates its condemnation for the violation of Article 2.4 of the UN Charter by the United States and Israel, and the subsequent action of Iranian government, which through their response also violated the provisions of Article 51 and breached the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the GCC states, in particular where there was no evidence that the first strike by the US and Israel came from the GCC countries. The United Nations Security Council, now more than ever, is called upon to prioritize humanity over geopolitical preferences. This is an existential moment for multilateralism, which must reverberate in all conflict areas, including Sudan, South Sudan, and the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. We continue to urge all our citizens currently in the Middle East region to contact the respective South African embassies accredited to their countries of residence to ensure that they are registered with and that their whereabouts are known to the embassies, that in times of need and crisis, it's easy to communicate. Citizens traveling abroad for any reasons, whether it be for business, education, holiday, amongst others, are reminded to register with the South African embassies consulate nearest to the destinations they are visiting. The list of contact details for missions abroad can be found on the department's website or the website of the various South African embassies and consulates. Citizens are also encouraged to download and register on the DERCO Travel Smart app, where you can also include details of your next of kin and log a case with the South African mission should you find yourself in distress while abroad. South African citizens are also advised to continue to monitor government platforms as well as reports from their residence countries for any relevant information and updates. We also continue to advise our citizens to check and verify job opportunities across the globe so that they don't fall prey to schemes and fraudsters across the globe on works opportunities or job opportunities that do not exist, and sometimes finding themselves falling into conflict zones and areas. With regards to our U.S. relations, the Department of International Relations and Cooperation has noted recent public remarks made by the United States Ambassador to South Africa. While South Africa welcomes active public diplomacy and the strengthening of bilateral ties, we emphasize that such engagements must remain consistent with established diplomatic etiquette and international protocols. In this regard, we have called in the Ambassador of the United States, Ambassador Bozelli, to explain his undiplomatic remarks. And in his engagements and visits to various sites in South Africa, including the Apartheid Museum, District 6, and other historical places. In the engagements, he acknowledges that given our history, South Africa needs redress and is willing to work with us constructively in this regard. I will later allow the Director General, Mr. Zane Dengo, to elaborate further on the discussion with the U.S. Ambassador. South Africa has consistently affirmed that the United States is a vital strategic partner for our economy and geopolitical issues, particularly on peace and security across the world. This relationship is not a one-sided relationship. South African companies maintain a significant investment in the United States, proportionate to our economy. It will not be possible for us to have the same size of investment to the US, given our economy size compared to the United States. But we have got some presence there, including in sectors such as energy and chemicals. Sasol is one of our leading companies invested in the USA, but there are also other South African companies that are there. And South Africa remains a leading supplier of critical minerals to the US. We continue to emphasize that critical minerals, there must be value addition in South Africa and in the African continent. And this is a partnership we look forward to continue to build with the United States. We reiterate that broad-based black economic empowerment is not reverse racism, as regrettably insinuated by the ambassador. It is a fundamental instrument designed to address the structural imbalances of South Africa's unique history. It is a constitutional imperative that the South African government can and will never abandon. Approximately 500 US companies currently operate in South Africa, employing over 250,000 people. These firms operate in full compliance with our domestic laws, including assisting us to address historical injustice through legislated BEE equivalent programs. This is a mutually beneficial relationship. The bilateral trade between the two countries can grow, but we should not behave as if South Africa's contribution is inconsequential to this relationship. South Africa has been one of the largest importers of American products on the continent. The bilateral trade between the two countries is valued at $15 billion from our side. We view these requirements as a form of localization a standard economic tool used globally to foster domestic growth. While our policies possess specific features to address historical injustice, they are aligned with international investment practices. Even in the US, they do have localization, given their unique environment. As we cannot tell President Trump how to deal with localization in the US, he also can't tell us how to deal with our domestic issues of sovereignty. South Africa remains committed to the rule of law. The Expropriation Act number 13 of 2024 is not intended to undermine property rights. Expropriation without compensation is a measure of last resort, or expropriation with nil compensation, subject to rigorous procedural safeguards and strictly limited to the 5 specific conditions outlined in Section 13 of the Act. These safeguards ensure that land reform is conducted in a manner that is just, equitable, and sustainable. On the question of rural safety, is not a phenomenon limited only to white people. It affects all South Africans, black, white, colored, and Indians. As you remember, when we were in the White House, the president did state that this is not an intention to persecute white people in South Africa. Everyone is affected by the high level of crime in our country, and we have to respond to that. But we have also responded to the issue of rural safety. And in this regard, our South African police had a meeting with the American Embassy in 2025, early 2025, to give them the report on our priority with regards to rural safety. Fully fledged report of what we're doing, what are the budgets, and who is involved. And some of the stakeholders have also participated in this process. As a sovereign state and a significant middle power, South Africa's foreign policy is anchored in our constitutional commitment to multilateralism and the peaceful settlement of disputes. South Africa's non-alignment does not entail a preference for any geopolitical bloc. Rather, it represents our ability to engage all international partners and take positions on a case-by-case basis, guided by our human rights outlook and international law. We remain steadfast in our resistance to being drawn into great power constellations, prioritizing instead a global governance system that is fair and inclusive. Thank you very much.